They arrested her for impersonating a SEAL commander, the Admiral. They thought she was a fraud, a woman in a commander's uniform, giving orders like she owned the base. No clearance confirmed, no record found, no permission granted. So they did what protocol demanded. They arrested her. But just as the cuffs locked into place, an admiral walked in, and everything changed. Welcome to United War. The scene begins. Morning drills had just ended at the naval installation. The training yard buzzed with movement, boots striking pavement, instructors calling out corrections, recruits rushing between stations. Order, discipline, routine. That's when she appeared. She walked straight through the main gate wearing a SEAL commander's uniform, not rushed, not hesitant, calm, focused, like someone who had crossed that same path 100 times before. Her posture was flawless, her stride steady, her eyes forward. She didn't look around to admire the base, she moved like she belonged there. The first suspicion. 2 security officers near the checkpoint noticed her immediately. Not because she looked out of place, but because they didn't recognize her. On a base like this, command staff weren't strangers. Faces were memorized, names were known, authority was familiar. One officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, ID verification?" She stopped without argument and reached into her pocket. No attitude, no annoyance, just compliance. She handed over the card. The device beeped. Red. Invalid clearance. Tension builds. The second officer frowned. "Ma'am, this credential isn't registered in the system." She tilted her head slightly, as if considering the statement. "That's because it wouldn't be," she replied calmly. Her voice wasn't defensive, it wasn't nervous, it was certain. And that certainty made the officers exchange a glance. People pretending to be officers usually overacted. They spoke too loudly, demanded respect, tried to intimidate. She did none of that, which somehow made it worse. Protocol takes over. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside." She didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't even ask why. She simply stepped aside. That's when the second officer spoke into his radio. "Security check, possible impersonation, request verification." Nearby personnel began to notice. Conversations slowed. Eyes drifted toward the scene. Word spread quickly in places like this. Someone was being detained. The arrest. Within minutes, additional security arrived. Procedure moved forward. Hands behind back, temporary restraints, escort positioning. Still, she didn't fight, didn't protest, didn't raise her voice. She just stood there, calm as ever, watching, observing, almost like she was waiting for something. One young recruit whispered to another, "If she's faking it, why isn't she panicking?" The other didn't answer, because he was wondering the same thing. The detail that didn't fit. As they secured her, one officer noticed something strange. Her uniform wasn't cheap. It wasn't a costume. It wasn't an imitation. Every insignia was regulation, every stitch correct, every placement exact. Even the rank pins showed authentic wear, the kind that only appears after years of real use. Imposters don't get details like that right. Cliffhanger ending. The officer tightened the restraint slightly. "Last chance, ma'am. Identify yourself." She met his eyes, calm, unshaken. "I already did." And just as they prepared to escort her away, a voice echoed across the yard. "Release her." The officers froze, because that voice belonged to an admiral.
The yard fell silent the moment the voice carried across the concrete. Release her. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Authority has a sound of its own. Every head turned at once. The Admiral was walking toward them. Measured steps, steady posture, eyes locked on the scene unfolding ahead. Officers nearby stiffened. Recruits straightened instinctively. Even the wind seemed to fade against the weight of his presence. The two security officers holding her exchanged a quick glance. They hadn't done anything wrong. Protocol had been followed. Identification failed. Detainment initiated. Everything by the book. Still, when a 4-star admiral personally walks into a situation, the book suddenly feels very small. The tension. The admiral stopped a few feet away. His gaze moved from the restraints to her face. Recognition flashed across his eyes. Not surprise, recognition. "Remove them," he said calmly. The first officer hesitated only a second. "Sir, we have a clearance failure and—" "Officer," the admiral interrupted, voice even. "That was not a suggestion." The restraints came off instantly. Metal clicked. Silence followed. She lowered her hands slowly, rubbing her wrist once, not in irritation, but as if checking circulation. Her expression never changed. No anger, no relief, just composure. Everyone notices. The surrounding personnel felt it immediately. Something wasn't right about this situation. Not wrong as in dangerous, wrong as in misunderstood. Because people who get arrested don't usually stand that calmly beside an admiral, and admirals don't usually step in personally for strangers. The unspoken history. The admiral studied her for a moment. "You're early," he said. "Yes, sir." Her answer was simple. Familiar. Not formal. Familiar. Several nearby sailors glanced at each other. That tone wasn't disrespectful. It was something rarer. It was the tone of someone who had spoken to him before, many times. Confusion spreads. The first security officer cleared his throat. "Sir, with respect, her credentials aren't registered in the system." "I'm aware," the admiral replied. That answer didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. Because now the question wasn't why she was detained. The question was, why would someone the admiral clearly recognized not exist in the system? The calm stranger. She stood quietly while the confusion spread around her, not trying to explain, not rushing to defend herself. She didn't need to. Whatever explanation existed, she knew it wasn't hers to give. That alone told the admiral she hadn't changed. Still patient, still disciplined, still precise, exactly as he remembered. A subtle test. He tilted his head slightly. "Enjoying the welcome committee?" For the first time, the corner of her mouth almost moved. "Standard procedure, sir." A few nearby sailors blinked. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't intimidated. She was answering a 4-star admiral the way seasoned officers speak to each other after years of shared operations. That realization sent a ripple of unease through the watching crowd. The officer's doubt. The second security officer shifted his stance. "Sir, should we verify her authorization through command records?" The admiral looked at him. Not annoyed, not angry, just steady. "You won't find it there." The officer frowned slightly. "Sir?" The admiral's voice lowered just enough to carry weight. "Because some records aren't stored in systems you have access to." That was the moment the atmosphere changed. Not tense, heavy. Cliffhanger ending. The admiral turned back to her. "They don't know who you are yet," he said quietly. She met his gaze. "No, sir." He gave a faint nod. "Then I suppose it's time they learned." Around them, the entire yard seemed to lean in without moving. Because whatever truth was about to be revealed, it was going to explain everything.
The admiral motioned for the officers to step back. The crowd of sailors watched in silence, their curiosity growing by the second. Every eye in the yard seemed to be drawn to her, the woman who had just been arrested and yet stood calm, composed, as if nothing unusual had happened. He studied her face carefully. Lines of fatigue and determination crossed her features. This wasn't someone playing a role. This was someone who had lived it. "Petty officer, or should I say commander," he said, his voice steady but carrying authority. A murmur ran through the crowd. Commander? None of the officers had seen a rank this high on anyone in this section recently. Some looked confused, others skeptical. She straightened, her posture perfect. "Yes, sir. I've held that rank under classified operations." The Admiral glanced around, lowering his voice slightly so only those closest could hear. "You've been impersonating a SEAL commander?" one junior officer asked cautiously, still confused. She shook her head. "Not impersonating, sir. I am a SEAL commander. I've been operating under deep cover assignments. My orders and my presence here are classified." The words hung in the air. A weight pressed on the yard, heavier than any uniform or regulation could create. Sailors shifted nervously, realizing this was no ordinary situation. She didn't explain further. She didn't need to. Every gesture, every line of her uniform, every scar and worn detail told her story silently. The Admiral knew it, the officers knew it, and slowly the rest of the crowd began to understand. The backstory. She had been part of operations so sensitive they weren't even recorded in the official database. Missions that required her to move through hostile territories, to coordinate elite teams, and to execute strategies that could change the outcome of conflicts. The scars on her hands, the faint marks along her arms, the subtle wear on her uniform, they were evidence of battles no one outside the Navy would ever know about. For years, she had walked in the shadows, executing orders without recognition, without medals, without acknowledgement. And now, here she was, suddenly in plain sight. The yard reacted. The sailors' whispers grew. Some stared at her in disbelief, some in awe. Even the security officers who had arrested her were frozen, realizing they had nearly detained someone far beyond their understanding. The Admiral stepped closer, his tone calm but commanding. "Your presence here was unexpected, but it is not unauthorized. I know who you are, and I vouch for you." Her eyes met his. No relief, no pride, just acknowledgement. "Yes, sir," she said. That simple exchange carried decades of mutual respect, forged in battles that most could only imagine. The turning point. For the first time, the yard shifted its perception. The whispers softened into nods of respect. The young recruits who had been in awe now understood the magnitude of the situation. This wasn't a woman trying to trick anyone. She was a legend walking in plain sight, and now her story was being revealed piece by piece. But even as respect settled over the crowd, the Admiral knew the next step was critical. There was more to reveal, more that would cement why she wasn't just a commander on paper, but a warrior whose history demanded attention. Cliffhanger ending. The Admiral looked around the yard and then back at her. "It's time everyone here understands what real leadership looks like," he said quietly. She nodded, calm, composed, ready. And in that moment, the silence of the yard spoke louder than any announcement ever could. The Admiral turned to face the gathered personnel. His voice carried across the yard, firm but measured. "Everyone listen carefully," he said. "The woman you almost arrested is not here by accident. She is a SEAL commander with years of classified deployments behind her. Her presence on this base is authorized, and her history speaks for itself." A hush fell over the crowd. Even the recruits, who had been whispering moments ago, straightened with wide eyes. Her story comes to light. She stepped forward slowly, not seeking attention, but prepared to answer questions if asked. "Sir," she said,
I've served multiple tours in operations that are still classified, missions in hostile territories, coordination of strike teams, situations that demanded split-second decisions. Some I returned from with injuries, some I returned from carrying others. My work has always been for the mission, not recognition. The crowd absorbed the weight of her words. She didn't exaggerate, she didn't brag. Every syllable was measured, honest, and carried the authority of someone who had earned it the hard way. The Admiral's respect. The Admiral studied her for a moment, nodding slowly. You've earned more than rank or medals could ever show. Your presence commands respect, not because of the uniform you wear, but because of the service behind it. The security officers who had detained her now looked almost guilty. They had done their job, but it was clear this woman was far beyond any ordinary personnel. The crew reacts. Around the yard, a subtle change took place. Sailors began to nod quietly, their previous skepticism replaced with awe. Recruits whispered among themselves, realizing that real heroes often operate quietly, unseen, and unrecognized. Even the officers who had questioned her credentials before stepped back, acknowledging the truth they hadn't fully understood. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She didn't need to. Her actions, her calm demeanor, and the scars that told her story were proof enough. The legacy of discipline and strength. The Admiral looked directly at her. "Carry on, Commander," he said. "Your orders and presence are respected here, and your missions will remain honored, though not all of them can be spoken aloud." She nodded, returning to her duties with the same calm efficiency she had shown since stepping onto the base. The yard watched as she moved among the missiles and equipment, methodical, focused, unshakable. It was clear now, leadership isn't defined by who can command attention, but who acts with courage, discipline, and integrity when no one is watching. For the sailors, this day became a lesson in humility and respect. For the recruits, it became a lesson in what it means to be a real warrior. And for the Admiral, it was a reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes are those who operate quietly, letting their actions speak louder than any uniform or title. She had walked in as a supposed imposter. She left as a legend.